Tonight's speaker is Dr. Chris Schrader of the Stem Cell Regeneration Clinic in Hutchinson, Kansas. He has been a chiropractor for the last 18 years, having graduated from the Palmer School of Chiropractic in Dallas, Texas, where he earned his degree. About 3 years ago, after Dr. Schrader injured himself and couldn't find any relief from his pain, he began to research stem cells. He partnered himself with Dr. John Byram, an osteopathic doctor in Kansas City, and learned the techniques for treating with stem cells. Since then, he's had a 92% success rate, treating backs, necks, knees, rotator cuffs, and other areas of the body. And you do have some testimonials there that I ran off for you too. Because of his success rate, I felt he'd be very qualified to help us learn and understand just what stem cell regeneration is. And of course it fits in with our mission statement as well. So we're so pleased to have Dr. Schrader with us this evening.
Thank you very much. So, starting off, I love your mission statement. That's always been a passion of mine, is just to try and help people get healthy without drugs and surgery. You know, how can we get you to optimal health without drugs and surgery? Because the real way we actually stay healthy is by our body's ability to heal itself. So, how many people in here have been to the doctor in the last 12 months? Almost every one of you, right? And what did you leave with? There's only two things you're going to get, right? You're going to get cut, or you're going to get some pills, or you're going to get sent to someone else that's going to cut you or give you pills. That's all very degenerative, isn't it? And so, when we look at the statistical average, the United States has 12% of the population of the world, but we take more medication than the rest of the world combined. Now that's great if it works, but what we see happening is we rank 43rd in the world in life expectancy. And we spend more money on healthcare than any other country in the world. Almost $10,000 for every man, woman, and child. And for that, we get ranked 43rd in the world in life expectancy. Anybody excited about that? It's a joke, isn't it? So this is what we've been seeing our trend happen in our country. And right now, we're in the first generation that we expect our kids to live a shorter lifespan than we are. So one thing we can agree across the board with medical doctors, DOs, and chiropractors is we know the system's broke. We can agree on that, right? It's broke. It's not heading us in the right direction. So I want to show you what I've learned. What controls everything in our body? It's not a trick question. The brain, right? The brain sends messages through the nerves, right? So the brain and the nervous system control everything in the body. So every one of you have been to the doctor in the last year. How many of you had your nervous system checked? One person. Cool. So if it controls everything and we're not even paying attention to where it's working and where it's not, how does that make any sense at all? It doesn't, does it? So when we look at how can our body heal itself, we got to start at the nervous system. So as a chiropractor, I've always been focused on trying to get people to heal properly. My goal as a chiropractor is that you never need this procedure I'm going to show you, because if you got to this, you waited too long, right? It wore out too far. But what's great about it is, as a chiropractor, I sure couldn't help things like disc degeneration or osteoarthritis. I couldn't reverse that. I couldn't get rid of joint degeneration in a knee or a rotator cuff tear. I can't fix that through an adjustment. I can do a lot of things, that's not it. But with this treatment I'm going to show you, we're able to do that as well. So I'm going to show you how this works and how we do that. First off, Thomas Edison Everybody's heard of Thomas Edison, right? So he said way back in the 1920s that the doctor of the future would give no medicine, but would interest his patients in the care of the human frame and a proper diet and in the cause and prevention of disease. How close are we to that? We kind of ran in the opposite direction, didn't we? He's dead on correct. What he left out is the greed model. So how can we get there, right? So what we're going to talk about today, first of all, I have to tell you, stem cell therapy is getting its name changed. The FDA has purchased the term stem cell, so doctors and anybody using this treatment can't call it stem cell anymore. It's now called placental allograft transplants. Sounds really exotic, doesn't it? So you start seeing more of this placental allograft transplants or adipose transplants. This is the same exact thing. It's just having to have its name changed because of an FDA stipulation. Okay? So my whole life, I've always focused on just trying to get people healthy, right? Even as a kid, I always wanted to get people healthy. My parents were pretty medically oriented. I didn't like it back then. And I've just followed that for the last 20 years. So when we look at these placental allografts, I already talked to somebody here in the audience who's had this done in my office. And she's had a great result from it. And just like Luke said, we have had about a 90% success rate in over 500 treatments that we've done in just my office alone. And I was the first one in line. So I had my injection a year and a half ago for a torn meniscus. And in 2.5 weeks, I was completely pain-free. It's pretty awesome. I was excited. It hurt me for a long time. So now I can run, I can play basketball, I can do anything I want, and it's fine. So I'm going to show you how that works and why. So what these are called are mesenchymal cells, okay? Now there's different types of the cell formerly known as stem cell. But these are the mesenchymal cells. And what they are, they're your body's master cells. So they haven't been categorized as any type of a cell yet. So these cells can become any type of cell in the body. So they can turn into ligament, tendon, cartilage, bones. They can also turn into other things like nerve cells or organ cells. So there's a lot of things that can be done with this. And this is why you see so many different studies. Like they're trying this out, they're studying it. There's government grants right now to see if they can help stop people who have dialysis. They're trying to regenerate kidneys. They're trying to regenerate pancreas. There's tons of studies on this going on right now. Now, well, in my office, we focus strictly on joints. We just focus on the joints. That's our specialty. But you'll see studies all over on all of these things. Rheumatoid arthritis and emphysema. They're using this for cancer treatment, trying to match genetic coding with these stem cells. So what's really neat about this is we're not covering up symptoms. We're not just covering up pain so you feel okay and you go do more and you tear it up worse, right? What it's actually doing is it's healing the cause of the problem. It's healing the tissue that's damaged that's causing you the pain to begin with. So what these cells do is really just changing medicine as we know it, right? So what we've specifically done in my office, we've done, there's one joint in the body I haven't gotten to do yet. I'm really excited when I get the first one. I haven't gotten an elbow yet. I don't know why. But we've done every other joint in the body but an elbow. So most of what I'm going to talk about today are the things we see the majority of, which are shoulders, hips, and knees. But we've done every joint in the body except the elbow. Not because it doesn't work, just because we haven't had one yet. But we've done anything from toes and heel spurs to knees, hips, shoulders, wrists. We've done fingers. We do a lot of spines too. Now, our success rate, we typically see people pain-free in 4 weeks. Does that sound exciting to anyone? Just to get a curiosity check for me, how many people are here because you've got a joint that you're in pain and you're hoping this could be a good answer for you? Awesome, very good percentage of you. So I highly encourage you to try it out. So when we look at other forms of treatment, just like I did when I injured my knee, I did that playing basketball, and I didn't like the forms of treatment I was being told I should do, like cortisone, right? That never fixes anything. That just covers up pain, decreases inflammation, and then you go do more and you tear it up worse, and then you get 9 months down the road and you're in worse shape than when you started, right? Then they say, well, you can get that meniscus trimmed, right? Just get that scoped. And statistics show it puts 600% more stress on their remaining meniscus. So if you're going to do anything at all other than walk around, you're going to tear it again. It's almost a guarantee. I didn't like those answers. I didn't want to give up all my sports and athletics. So I kept looking. I tried diethermy. I tried a lot of the nutritional supplements. And I know people, those have worked on it. It didn't work for me. I tried. But when I got this, it was a life-changing situation. So we're abbreviating placental allograft transplants to PAT. It's not just for football anymore. So once your body starts to degenerate, it keeps degenerating, right? There's no way your body can heal itself from a degenerated joint or from osteoarthritis. Now with this, it actually can. It's like it puts your body's healing into a turbo. It's really amazing what it does. I'm going to show you a lot of examples of this. So it's just all about regenerating it. So I wanted to share with you a few things that this doesn't work on, and then I'll show you what it does work on. But the 3 things this doesn't work on is if you've already had a complete joint replacement, this doesn't help that. So it's got to have something to copy. So if all you have in there is titanium and plastic, it's not going to work. If you've torn a muscle or a ligament or a tendon completely 100%, this won't fix that. You have to have that surgically reattached first. Now, if I've had up to an 85% rotator cuff tear that did great with an injection. He's doing awesome. He's pain-free now. He was 85% tear. And then if you've had a complete joint fusion, whether that was surgical or whether arthritis just grew it together, it won't help that as well. Now, this does help reabsorb certain amounts of arthritis. It's a little different for everybody on that, but we do see a reduction in arthritis from the stem cell injector. We'll edit that part out. The placental allograft transplants. So these are just a list of different treatments that we've had good results treating with the allograft transplants. So the majority of what we're treating is osteoarthritis, but disc herniations, it's really great on that. The average person on a spine for us is about 6 weeks for pain relief, rather most joints are 4 weeks. It seems to take about 2 extra weeks on the spine to get pain relief, but it works great. So I want you to think about a couple of things. For you to raise your hands that you've got a problem and you're hoping this helps, I want you to think about how long you've had pain. And so, how many people in here have had pain over, say, 5 years? How about 10? 15? 20? 25? 30? So how long is too long to have pain? And what have you done different in your life because you have pain? It's kind of sad to think about it if you don't have an answer on how to fix it, but how many times have you circled the parking lot because you wanted to park close? Because it hurts you bad to walk far, right? Or maybe you didn't go on vacation because you couldn't walk as much as everybody else that was going was going to walk. Or maybe you didn't get on the floor with the kids or grandkids because you couldn't get back up. Anybody else have done that? So what if you parked in the back of the parking lot so you get more steps on your Fitbit? Just because it was fun. Wouldn't that be a whole different life? Wouldn't it? I mean, life's about living, isn't it? Just enjoying your family and your friends and doing the things you want to do. We had a family friend who, he really wanted to get his shoulder done. He was the one who had an 85% tear in his rotator cuff. Now, my wife's from Arkansas. Now, there's a few things that are really important to people in Arkansas. Duck hunting tops the list. Right? Nobody's been to Arkansas? You know it's true. And so he told me he wanted to get this injection in between deer and duck season. That was the important thing because he wanted to be able to shoot a shotgun by the time duck season came around. And then he told me it was an 85% tear. I was concerned. This is a family friend. This is not one you want to go back. You have to see this guy over. But yeah, so we gave him the injection in between deer and duck season. He got it, and he's doing fantastic. He's been doing great since then. So I was impressed with that because an 85% tear is a very substantial tear to a rotator cuff. So if you think about these questions, like how long you had pain and how long you get the pain, how much does this affect your life? It's discouraging, right? You think you're more patient or less patient with your spouse when you're in pain? If you're concerned and not sure, ask your spouse. They know. You ever had a doctor tell you you're just too old? I hear this diagnosis all the time. It's the worst diagnosis I've ever heard in my life because your other joints are younger. Does that make any sense? Of course not. Or maybe that nothing can be done. That can be frustrating. So it's not just about age, because it's more about a wear and tear problem. Anybody ever knock their car out of alignment? How long do your tires last if you don't get that fixed? Would you ever just put another tire on there without changing the alignment? That would be stupid, right? So the same thing in our body. If we've got too much wear and tear on a joint, it's going to wear out faster. So if we try to fix the joint and don't take the stress off the joint, guess what's going to happen? It's going to wear out again. So one thing we've got to do is figure out why did it wear out in the first place. So if it's a chronic stress, we need to find a different way to do what we've been doing. If it's trauma, that's one thing. Obviously, we just don't expect it, right? But it's not just about age, it's about wear and tear. So, I'm just curious, how many people would like to get rid of their problem? Right? Of course you would, right? And what a better way than to regenerate it? So, you've got 4 options, right? You can always do nothing different and just keep dealing with it. You could try things like painkillers and steroids and anti-inflammatories, or you can go to surgery. You can cut it out. Or you can try and rebuild it. These are our options. How many people in here are on a farm? Okay, cool. So we're in the middle of Kansas. I freak out when no one raises their hand to that question. Like, where am I? Because I grew up on a farm. We custom cut it when I was a kid. I'm from around here. I was born and raised in Hutch. I was born in Hutch, grew up in Mueller, ventured way out to Inman, rebellious act. That's where I graduated high school, and we custom cut it from Texas to Montana when I was young. And one thing I've learned through the years is farmers, man, they're tough. And they don't take care of their bodies, but they sure take care of their equipment. Right? So why is that? That made me scratch my head a little bit. So why do we maintain our combine and tractor while we run ourselves into the ground? And what I really came to the conclusion is, it's pretty easy to maintain equipment. We know what we got to do. You got to grease the zerks, change the oil, and look at the belts, right? How do we maintain ourselves? You go to the doctor and get drugs? It's not maintaining anything. So how do we do it? So when we look at how we maintain our body, that's been kind of a mystery. We haven't been taught that well, and that's why wellness is such a buzzword now. I love seeing all this stuff and everything I saw out front there. That's stuff I've been talking about in my office for years. And wellness is just something that's eluded us. It's not part of our healthcare system now. We want to wait until you can't stand up straight so we can cut something out of you. That's what we call healthcare today, isn't it? That's why we rank 43rd in the world life expectancy. We're just going to wait till you're just on your desk door before we do anything. And then we're going to see if we can bring it back, right? We're good at that. But why don't we just try and get healthy and stay that way? If your check oil light came on in your car, you wouldn't stick a piece of tape over it, would you? It's going to blow up. Right? So a $5 quart of oil can turn into a $3,000 engine block real fast when you want to ignore it. Our body's the same way. Pain is a warning sign. If we're in pain and we're not knowing how to deal with it or fix it properly, then it's just going to keep getting worse, and it's going to blow up. It's going to create a bigger problem. So I want to give you a couple testimonials. These are all local from my office. This is Ken, he's from Burton. And he had knee pain for 20 years. He couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes. He had coworkers and friends that had had bad experiences with knee replacements. He knew it wasn't an option for him. So in his own words, within the first week after his injection, he got to sleep through the night. And I can't remember the last time I was able to sleep through the night without being in pain, causing him to wake up, reposition himself, and try to get back to sleep. Now, in 4 weeks, I'm down to a pain level of a 0 or a 1, and I recently got back from a vacation where I was able to go for walks, and I'm feeling great. Even friends are noticing I'm walking better, and all are asking what I've done, and I tell them about my stem cell injection, and they can't believe that it can work this well. This is Butch, he's from Wichita. You want to make sure your shoulders and knees heal the best that he possibly could, so he memorized all of them. There's a list of protocol on how you get back into activity. You don't ever have to be sedentary after one of these, but we need motion, but we don't want to overdo it. We don't want to tear up the juvenile cells that are healing. So before the pain in his shoulder got so bad, before it got bad, he was doing 25 push-ups to start his workout routine. Before he got an injection, he could barely do half of a push-up. 8 weeks after the injection, he's back up to 10 push-ups. He might be pushing it a little too fast, but that's cool that he can do it. He claims the pain level is down so significantly that it's hard to remember what the pain was like before, and he's looking forward to golfing again. Bush said, I'm a negative person, so if I think it's doing good, it is. What a great quote. So one of the most common questions I get asked about this service is, how much will my insurance cover this? And unfortunately, right now in the United States, there's no insurance company that will cover stem cell treatments. They won't cover any type of treatment similar to this. They won't cover, I'm going to show you the different types, methods they use this on, and insurance won't cover any of those at this point. Now, that may change someday. It may not. Who knows? Right now, they're working on it, but they're way far from getting it approved and through. So it's not going to be anytime in the next few years for sure. Now I want to show you some comparisons of these forms of treatment that are recommended to us now, and compare them to what this type of treatment does. You know, if we go get a knee replacement, we have about 3 to 6 months of rehab with that. There's no guaranteed results. There's a high percentage of failure and complications, with 50% needing a follow-up surgery. Average cost, $55,000. Insurance will cover that. That's weird, isn't it? Hopefully you don't have a 10% copay. That's a big chunk of money, isn't it? Shoulder surgery. I've heard this is a very painful surgery from most people I talk to. 6 to 12 months of rehab, average cost $5,300 to $22,000. A 43% success rate on a major tear. 1 out of every 400 got an infection, and according to the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons in 2012, large rotator cuff repairs retore 57% of the time. Anybody want to sign up for that one? A lot of people do it all the time though, don't they? But these statistics, I mean, and looking back at this, why are they re-tearing? Well, if you don't take the stress off of why it tore in the first place, and you patch it, it's going to tear again. I mean, that's not a big surprise, is it? Of course, we've all heard about the opioid crisis, haven't we? The last 2 years, boy, this has been all over the news, how bad opioids are. Right now, the most recent statistic says that you are more likely to die of an opioid than a car wreck. Over 100,000 people died last year from opioid overdose. Last month, there were 2 medical practices shut down in the state of Kansas for pushing opioids illegal. This is a huge problem. And what I find is, we know that if you're in pain and you can't do what you want to do, or you can take this pill and go do whatever you want, which one would you do? I mean, I take the pill. I don't want to lay around waiting. You know, I mean, that's a terrible The problem is those are terrible options, aren't they? But this is the options we've been given. Either take this or we can cut you open, and then if that doesn't work, we'll just give you more of this. And we'll call it pain management. This is our problem in our healthcare system. How many people in here have had a cortisone shot? Wow, a lot of them, right? This is the first form of treatment they usually push you towards, right? And act like it's no big deal, don't they? They're like, hey, yeah, I can see you're in some pain. Hey, I'm just going to stick this needle in there. And before you know it, that's a needle, isn't it? Yeah, you really have one? Come on, that's a big needle. And they dig it around, and it's a painful procedure. But they probably didn't tell you this, that when you get an injection, you get 8% of bone density loss within 4 months. So if you have osteoporosis and they give you a cortisone shot, you're now at increased risk of a fracture. Now cortisone, does that ever fix anything? It's not even designed to fix anything. At best, it's going to get you out of pain for a little while. Maybe 7 to 9 months is the goal. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, right? You still get these lovely side effects though. Low doses consistently over a year can cause a cataract, throws your blood sugar into a tailspin, so it'll spike it and crash it. I talked to a nurse at one of my lectures, and she's diabetic, and she had gotten a cortisone shot, and her blood sugar went over 500. That's scary. That can blow a kidney right like that. It didn't for her, fortunately, but that's a dangerous situation to be in. So again, if we're looking at a treatment, it's not going to fix it, maybe give you a little pain relief, and we just increase your risk of a fracture or blowing a kidney out with a blood sugar spike. Does that seem like the risk and benefit match there? I don't think so. That seems very questionable to me. And then what happens with any steroid is it spikes our immune system for a very short period of time, and then it crashes it. So you're very likely to get sick after you get one of these as well. Spinal surgery. $80,000 is the average cost of a spinal surgery with a whopping 35% success rate. Now, most likely to have a successful spinal surgery are young, athletic people. And the average person getting the surgery is 54 years old. That's a pretty poor outcome for $80,000, but your insurance will cover that. And according to the New York Times online version, April 8, 2012, 72% of people that had a spinal surgery needed a follow-up surgery. Now think about this. If we fuse a disc, like I see way too much of this. I was looking at one of these just this afternoon. So if we fuse joints in your spine, now the one above and below it has to work harder. Right? I mean, that's, of course it does. So the one above it and below it have to work harder. So now 7 to 10 years, they're worn out. So now what we got to do is we got to go in and we got to take out that hardware and expand it, one up and one down, for 7 to 10 years, and then we'll do it again. When do we stop? When are we going to stop? So I had a lady, we were speaking in Newton, and she came up to me and she's like, I don't know if you can help me. I had L3 and 4 fused, and then they came back about 6 years later and they fused my sacrum to L2. And she said, just to tell you the long story short, I just got scheduled for my 9th spinal surgery. They want to put 2 rods in and fuse me from T10 to my sacrum. Because she had 1 disc bulge. Does that seem like the best course of action for that? I was when I asked the doctor that, like, you do that to your mom? I mean, I have a litmus test for medical procedures. I have a litmus test, all right? I want to know if the doctor was in my chair, if he'd do the same thing he's recommending to me. That's a fair question, isn't it? And I also want to know if he'd be willing to do it to his mom, assuming he loves his mom. Those are fair questions, aren't they? And so there was a doctor in Hutchinson, he's retired now, but we had a family friend who was an anesthesiologist. And he was working with him, and this spinal surgeon was moving a patient from one table to another and blew 3 discs in his back. That's a rough day at work, wouldn't you say? So our friend, who's the anesthesiologist, asked him, he said, so you're getting spinal surgery to fix that? He's like, absolutely not, I would never get spinal surgery. Guy's been a spinal surgeon for like 28 years. That bothers me. Does that bother you? That doesn't make sense.
Makes money.
It does make money. All surgery has risks. So according to the Journal of Orthopedic Medicine, bleeding problems, blood clots, and hemorrhaging obviously an increased risk with any surgery. Infections are 4 out of 100, and 1 out of every 400 people die within a month of their surgery. Horrible statistics. And then, of course, once you're done with the surgery, you're at an increased risk of needing NSAIDs, muscle relaxers, and painkillers. I mean, this is the Journal of Orthopedic Medicine saying this. They know this. And so they get in trouble for all these opioids, right? So they just got fined, what was it, 75 million? Is that what I saw? Like this week? Nobody else saw that? I think it was a $75 million fine. Do you know how much they make a year off of opioids? Like $300 billion? Give me a break, that's like getting a speeding ticket to them. It's sad, isn't it? And we're the ones paying for this, both financially and physically. So that's depressing. So I want to show you how this stuff works, because that's awesome, isn't it? So there's 3 ways in the United States that we can get these cells. We can get these mesenchymal cells 3 different ways. The number 1 possibility is bone marrow, where they're actually going to drill a hole in your tibia or in your femur, and they're going to extract bone marrow, they're going to centrifuge that down, and then they're going to re-inject that back into your joint. Anybody want to volunteer? It sounds a little invasive, doesn't it? Now, it's a pretty effective form of treatment, but it's not something you really need to do for a joint regeneration. Now, they're using this form of treatment a lot for disease processes like cancer, but you don't really need that invasive for a joint. Now, adipose is another way they're doing it. It's a similar treatment. It's not quite as invasive, but they're going to take fat cells from your stomach or your buttocks, and they're going to do the same thing. They're going to centrifuge them down, separate those cells, take out the plasma, re-inject that back into the joint, and get the healing that way. Now, there are 7 clinics in the state that do some form of regenerative treatment. That's including Kansas City. Kansas City Hospital does quite a bit of this as well. They're doing quite a bit of bone marrow with the disease treatment. But there's 7 clinics that I know of in the state of Kansas doing any form of this whatsoever. Most of them are doing adipose. Now, the reason I'm going to show you why I don't think this is the best is because when we look at the number of stem cells we have, the older we get, the less stem cells we have. Okay? So when you're doing bone marrow or adipose, it's going to be related to your age. Now, the way I use is with placental or umbilical. Now, the other question I get asked, the 2 most questions are, does my insurance cover it? And 2, are you killing babies? Right? You hear that all the time. That's the big thing about this type of treatment, right? Is this affecting aborted babies? It's not, okay? We're getting this from mothers that donate their placenta and their umbilical cord to science on a scheduled C-section. So what they do is they sign a waiver saying they'd like to donate this to science, and then they do a test on the mom to make sure there's no attractable diseases, and then after the baby's born, they recheck mom and baby to make sure there's none of those diseases as well. So then they come in and they collect the umbilical cord and the placenta. They were just incinerating those 20 years ago, right? What use did we have of those? Some weird people made tea out of them, right? And then they just take them back to the lab. I've used 2 different labs in the year and a half that I've used. I think they're both awesome products. I've had no problems with either one. Predictive Biotech, which is in Utah, and Surgenics, which is in Scottsdale, Arizona. So they take those back to their lab there, where they're going to extract the serum, and then they're actually going to freeze it. Now, when we order this in our office, what they do is they stick it on dry ice, and they overnight deliver that to us. And then we stick it in liquid nitrogen to keep it very, very cold. Now, these cells, when they're frozen, there's about a 12% die-off on the cryogenic process. That's expected. I talked to the research analysts, the doctors for Predictive and Surgenics, and they told me they really expect about a 6 to 8% die-off, but they give it a 12% just to make sure their numbers are covered. So when we look at the part of the cells that we're using, what we call Wharton's jelly, which is kind of the goo on the outside of the umbilical cord, that's what has the highest concentration of these mesenchymal cells. Now, the placenta has a lot of growth factors and hundreds of different proteins that help our current cells heal better, and it also helps tell these these placental allografts what to become and how to do it, okay? So that's how this works. Now, when we get them, I'm going to leave them frozen until somebody's in my office, and then we'll thaw them out right there, and as soon as they thaw, we want to get them in the body as soon as possible. They don't last very long at a room temperature basis, so you don't show up. I'm not eating a set of stem cells, right? So on a 2 cc injection, there's 1.1 million live mesenchymal cells in there. I'd encourage you to look at Predictive's website. It's really thorough. There's a lot of great information on how they process this and how it survives and how it works. I had a couple of people ask me, what's that? Predictive Biotech. I had a lot of people ask me, well, don't the cells all die when we freeze them? I don't know where that started from, because that doesn't make any sense, because we've been freezing red and white blood cells for decades, right? When they transport, you donate blood, they're going to freeze it and send it to the hospital. White blood cells, plasma, they freeze it and they send it. It doesn't kill the cells. It frees embryos. You know what I mean? I don't know where that idea came from. So these are the 3 ways. Now, if you want to leave the country and get away from the FDA, like, I don't know, Dr. Reardon, anybody know him? Or the name, right? Reardon Clinic in Wichita? He's not there, is he? He's in Costa Rica doing this. But what they do in Europe and in Costa Rica for a cool $55,000, they're going to extract your cells, but what the FDA won't allow here is they're going to stick them in an incubator and they're going to grow them and concentrate them and get a higher number, and then they're going to stick it in your joint and run it in an IV through your entire body. Just 55 grand, Europe's beautiful, go get it, right? So that's the form of treatment. Now, Europe's been doing this for a good 30, 40 years already. We're way behind when it comes to this. I talked to a doctor at one of my talks in Wichita. He was telling me after I spoke that he practiced in India in the 80s. And he said, I had no idea. I'd never even heard of the stem cell in the 80s. Nobody did. But he said, when I had a leprosy patient come in, we figured out that if we would inject placenta into the leprosy sores, they'd heal. How cool is that? I mean, isn't that neat? And they've used placenta on burn victims for quite a while. I even heard Newton Hospital just had a patient that had this stuff where they take just really thin slices of placenta and they put it on a burn and it heals real fast. These cells are amazing. We just didn't know what they did and what they even were for a long, long time. So I want to show you how important it is with the age process and the concentration of stem cells we can have. So this first chart, you may not be able to read the bottom, but I'll read it to you. So the first line here, when we're born, 1 in every 10,000 cells in our body is a stem cell, a mesenchymal stem cell. Now, as you're a teenager, it goes down to 1 in 100,000. By age 30, it's 1 in every 250,000. By the time you're 50, it's 1 in every 400,000. And by the time you're 80, it's 1 in every 2 million. So if you're doing adipose or bone marrow, fill in your age, and that's the concentration you're going to get. But if we use the placental and the umbilical, you're getting this 1 in 10,000 every single time. Our oldest patient's 93. She's doing great. That sure wouldn't work with adipose and bone marrow. Teenager, maybe. That's why I think this form is a lot more effective than the others. So this is what you get in each injection. The placenta has the cytokines, which are a very strong anti-inflammatory. So what we want is a very short-term increase in inflammation, about 24 to 48 hours from the injection. I want to see your inflammation just increase a little bit. We got to be off NSAIDs for these to work right. If you've had a cortisone shot, we got to wait 6 weeks before we can do something like this, or it won't work. We've got to have some inflammation in there. Then, after a couple of days of increased inflammation, your inflammation is going to drastically decrease. We have growth factors in here. These are the proteins that are in there that really help take our current cells that are struggling, and it helps them heal better. It's also going to help these mesenchymal cells heal better. Now the scaffolding, this is really the key. The scaffolding, what that does is it's a molecule that will attach to a damaged cell, and that's how your body knows what's damaged. So when we get inflammation in a joint, our body sends the inflammation there to try and show the problem so that it heals. The problem is when it doesn't heal, and then we just get chronic inflammation, how do we get out of that mess? And so what this will do, the scaffold will attach to whatever damaged tissue there is, whether that's cartilage or ligament or bone. It's attaching to that, so then when the mesenchymal cell sees that, it's going to turn into whatever that scaffold attached to. So that means when there's no more damaged tissue, these mesenchymal cells aren't going to keep becoming more of it. Otherwise you'd have like cartilage growing on the side of your leg. You don't want that either, right? So that's how it knows what it needs to do. The hyaluronic acid, anybody ever heard of hyaluronic acid treatment? Yeah, they've been using this a long time. Veterinarians use this more than anybody on dogs and horses that have joint problems. It's a really good lubricant. I mean, I would take that over a cortisone shot any day. It's a really good treatment to help motion in the joint. Now, it doesn't last that long, but it's a really good temporary pain relief for a joint. Now, that's just one of the 5 things you get in this. But then the Wharton's jelly is what has the highest concentration of those live mesenchymal cells. And so that's what's going to do the long-term healing. So when we do an injection, what studies show is it's going to heal. There will be increased live mesenchymal cells in there for 9 months. Now typically you only need 1 injection, and most of the healing is going to happen in about 3 months. It happens rather rapidly. So just to kind of recap here, it's going to slightly increase inflammation and then strongly reduce it. It fights cell death, and then it's going to turn into whatever damaged cells you have, whether that's cartilage, ligament, tendon. There was actually a study a patient brought me 2 weeks ago. I found very fascinating, and I wanted to do more research on it to figure out how they did this. But a gentleman went in to get his shoulder done with this treatment. They injected his shoulder, and he was really frustrated 6 weeks later because it was no better. So the doctor thought that was really peculiar. Couldn't figure out why it didn't work. These cells are always healing something. That's what we learned. They're always trying to heal something. So the doctor somehow was able to run a test on this gentleman and find out where do those mesenchymal cells, where do they go? And what they found is he had a heart defect. And those cells had left the shoulder, and they all went to his heart, and it saved his life. And he was mad because he had a failed shoulder treatment. So they did a second one, and his shoulder got better. Now that's mind-blowing, isn't it? I just think that's fascinating. The only thing I don't know is how they tracked those. That's what I need to figure out. That's what I want to learn is how did they track those? But fascinating story. Now the FDA, the way they regulate this form of treatment is through a division called the AATB, the American Association of Tissue Banks. And the main thing they're looking for is they want to make sure there's no rejection to this form of treatment. So they're making sure the quality's there, and they're checking the cryogenic process, making sure that those cells are frozen properly. They're also making sure there's no red and white blood cells. And if you do enough research, you'll find a company, unfortunately, here in Kansas City, they got in trouble for this. They were using cord blood instead of the Wharton's jelly. Now, cord blood has the highest number of these mesenchymal cells. The hard part is getting all the red and white blood cells out of there. So they thought they had it perfected. They had 6 people that had a reaction to it. They rejected it. Now that's unfortunate, obviously, and so they got a big old fine from the FDA. Now I would predict this is a company called Legion in Kansas City, and I would predict if they don't go bankrupt over this, In 5 to 10 years, they'll probably have the best product on the market. But they've got to master that filtration process to get these red and white blood cells out of there so there's not rejection. So the head of the FDA, this is in November of 2017, the head of the FDA made this statement. He said the FDA originally established a regulatory framework for these products that went into effect clear back in 2005. So but in the last decade, we've seen improbable advances that hold out to great hope for patients. So I believe that with the ability to facilitate the regeneration of parts of the human body, we're bearing witness to the beginning of a paradigm shift in the practice of medicine. About time? This is the practical promise of modern application of regenerative medicine. These concepts are no longer the stuff of science fiction, but rather real-life science where cells and tissues can be engineered to grow healthy, functional organs to replace diseased ones, where new genes can be introduced to the body to combat diseases, and where adult stem cells can generate replacements for cells that are lost to injury or illness. And that's why the promise of this technology is why the FDA is so committed to encouraging and supporting innovation in this field. So when we look at different studies we've seen throughout the world now, there's a study that came out of Canada that showed they took 8 quadriplegic patients, they injected them in the spine with stem cells, and 2 of them got up and walked again. It's mind-blowing. So to say we can regrow a little cartilage is like saying you need a Ferrari to get back and forth to work, right? I mean, it's amazing. I've never heard a single quadriplegic patient of any type of treatment ever walking again in history. They did it 2 out of 8. I mean, that's incredible. It's exciting. This is Cindy. She was in constant pain when she came to my office, found it difficult to walk. She had such a sad story. So she had lined her house with chairs because she never knew when her knee would just give out and she'd fall. She couldn't hardly leave her house. I'm proud of her for even making it to my seminar. Reading her story, I was shocked she ever even made it there. The pain kept me inside. I prayed to go out in public because the pain was so severe. The fear of my knee giving out from under me was just too much. I wanted to give this therapy a chance because 2 knee replacements or living in a wheelchair was not an option for me. So she had the injection, and then she said she felt more stable the next morning. That's ridiculous. Since the injection in April, I've walked through the Hutchinson Zoo, I'm working in the yard, and I do it again in a heartbeat. Life-changing, right? That's why we do it. I like pictures. What do you guys think? Does that look any better? That was 4 days after her injection. A little different? So within 4 days, she said pain and swelling decreased, no kidding, in both my foot and hand. At 2 weeks, the bone spur in my heel stopped giving me pain. The nerves in my foot that were torn and caused my foot to be numb for 7 years seem to have healed, and my feeling in the foot is now normal. After 7 years. I'm taking normal steps now without crutches and wobbling like I weigh 400 pounds. How cool is that? It's amazing. So the whole idea of this treatment is to get rid of pain, improve function, get you off medication and painkillers, right? So you don't have to do surgery and drugs anymore. I want to show you some x-rays pre and post of what these can do. Now this is just an example of a good knee on the left, and that's a really, really rough knee on the right. So I want to see that spacing in there, right? Now this is a patient that had a torn meniscus on this right knee, and slight joint degeneration on the left knee. Can you guys see how thin this is on this medial side? Now that's the same person's x-rays over there 8 weeks later. That's fantastic. Okay, now he's pain-free in 8 weeks. And we can already see cartilage growth on x-ray in 8 weeks. Anybody ever seen that before? I don't know anything else that can do that. So this is an example of a shoulder. So this is the top of the arm, right here, right? Ball and socket, shoulder blade right here, AC joint right there. And that one over there, that's an ugly mess, right? Bone on bone. This is a patient with a rotator cuff tear, and in 12 weeks, his joint space has tripled. Everybody excited? That's fantastic, isn't it? Triple joint space in 3 months. This is one of my favorite ones. So the picture on the left, this is the side view of the knee. So you can see the kneecap, and you can see how there's almost no joint space right here. There's a bone spur right here and right there. Now 8 weeks later, look at that spacing where there was none. Where did that bone spur go? It's gone. That one's much, much smaller. That's cool, isn't it? Good question.
So you said that it heals bone spur?
It can help reabsorb a bone spur, yes. Now, it differs on everybody. You know, some of the knees I've seen are, I just look at them like, oh dear, you know, what do we do with this? So, I mean, it depends on how much you have.